Akron, Ohio might best be known by me as the city where the infamous Rolling Acres Mall once stood. But for decades, it has also been home to a relic of sports past. It's called the Rubber Bowl, a humble sports stadium which began all the way back in 1939. However, since 2008, the stadium has sat largely vacant and visibly abandoned, becoming a well-known urban exploration spot in Ohio. So let's find out how this beloved stadium ultimately floundered and why it was left completely abandoned. This episode of Abandoned is sponsored by Incogni. Use code BRIGHTSUN at the link below to get an exclusive 60% off an annual plan. It was the late 1930s, and south of the city center was the Akron Municipal Airport. Its director, Bain Fulton, was trying to figure out a way to improve the land at the end of the runway. It's known as the runway and safety area. Water was collecting in this grassland, and to prevent it from getting worse and turning into a swamp, additional soil was needed to grade the land. Fulton decided to excavate some land at a nearby hill and use the dirt for the airport land. But Fulton also saw a new opportunity with that excavation. The hill was so steep that by carving out a big chunk of land, it could make a great wraparound grandstand. Fulton was so excited by this idea that he decided to pursue it. Together with his grandson, they traveled across the country, touring various venues for inspiration on what they could build. So after the excavation was complete, Fulton would use the dugout for various events over the years. But he still had his sights on something much more permanent, more of an actual landmark. He came up with this conceptual photograph, and with government approval, they ultimately started construction on the stadium in 1939. That was paired with a campaign which had just been set up for locals to donate $1 each to the project. The future stadium was going to be more than just a sports venue though. For the city of Akron, it was the first major symbol of community excitement since the Great Depression, and workers took pride in what they were building. Clearly, the community was excited too, and over the course of construction, over 30,000 residents pledged $1 each. By 1940, it was finished at the cost of over $540,000, or around $12 million today. Over 36,000 excited fans packed the stadium for its inauguration, dedicated by town officials as the Rubber Bowl, named after its unique shape and by the fact that Akron was then known as the rubber capital of the world. A local high school football team first took to the field, and over the subsequent years, multiple different teams would play there. Notable major games included the Cleveland Browns and Brooklyn Dodgers, with their events selling out some 30-odd thousand seats. This popularity would continue on through the 50s, 60s, and into the 70s. Fulton's dream very much became a reality, and by 1971, the University of Akron would get the stadium as essentially a donation from the city. Just prior to the field being replaced by artificial turf, the stadium would host some major outdoor performances too, from both Stevie Wonder and the Rolling Stones. Tens of thousands would gather for Easter service, while in the 80s, college football, specifically the Akron Zips, would have their games televised on ESPN. Big events like this would continue on, as would the massive headlining concerts from artists like Bob Dylan, the Grateful Dead, Simon and Garfunkel, Van Halen, Ringo Starr, Metallica, all just to name a few. These concerts and events would squeeze every last inch of capacity, sometimes pushing over 40,000 people in the bowl. Its history and location made this a special stadium, one that obviously had some quirks and was very unique for the area. It was steep and provided seats that were close to the action. When it was packed to the brim, the unique shape made the crowds roar. Many loved it, and with its hometown feeling, it was the favorite home for several high school and college football teams. But at the same time, its facilities were getting old and perhaps a bit antiquated. By the early 2000s, its age was showing, and it was a bit of a distance from their largest team to play there, the Akron Zips. Its long-term fate was put into question in 2007, when it was announced that the University of Akron would be constructing a new stadium, one that was on-site and designed to replace the Rubber Bowl. After spending $60 million to build a brand new facility, the InfoCision Stadium opened in September of 2009. The Zips played their final game against the Buffalo Bulls at the Bowl the November prior, and now the iconic local stadium was left with no long-term tenant. By 2012, the stadium was in a state of abandoned limbo, still with the Akron Zips logo on the AstroTurf. A company called Team One Marketing would ultimately purchase the stadium for just $38,000 in 2013. They claimed they were going to make all types of changes and fix up the rapidly declining site, promising to bring a team for the USFL there. At this point, graffiti sporadically covered some exterior walls, while weeds began to grow through the cracks in the concrete. By October, an auction would be held where locals would buy up basically all the fixtures and other sports memorabilia there. This was all in preparation for the big renovation, and they planned to have it open by 2014. However, the team the company resurrected to bring to the USFL, the Akron Fire, was announced that they wouldn't be joining the league. This now left the Rubber Bowl with no future tenants. So the owners pivoted, now announcing an entertainment-based focus for the future. They said this could include a dome over the entire facility to protect it from weather and have it open year-round. They claimed they had financial backing from a Colorado-based company willing to put over $10 million into the project to see it through, and the owners claimed they could have everything put together in a matter of months. Even the city of Akron said those claims were ambitious, and that was definitely justified if you actually looked at the condition of the site. The Rubber Bowl was clearly declining. With the original University of Akron sign still out front, the stadium's boxes were now fully stripped out, with all of its glass gone. The former grandstand seats, or what was left of them, were now all piled at the bottom, while tall weeds and grass were peeking through everywhere. By this point, those massive floodlights were now laying on the field, their shattered glass scattered all over the AstroTurf. The property was not looking good, and the cost to repair everything only grew by the month. Despite these conditions, their owners, Team One, somehow scheduled a music festival to play at the Rubber Bowl in the spring of 2015. There was absolutely no way this would have ever worked. I guess nobody at the festival actually looked up what venue they had just booked, especially since the bowl had no electricity or running water and was a complete mess. The festival was obviously canceled. By spring 2017, the owners were neglecting the property. Would you believe they never got their dome installed? In fact, no work had been done at the Rubber Bowl at all, and Team One were now delinquent on their tax bill. Clearly, they were not going to hold true to their promises, and the local county would foreclose on the stadium. They would assume ownership and pass it over to the city of Akron, who would then figure out what to do. By this point, the Rubber Bowl was a well-known abandoned location, an easy one to get into. This meant the conditions within were getting pretty bad. Graffiti covered most walls around the stadium, while debris littered the grandstands. The whole site looked like a disaster zone, something fit for an apocalyptic landscape. But there was progress on future plans for the stadium, or perhaps more accurately, the promise of no future. The city was now opting to demolish it, and by 2018, they had sealed up many of the entrances, and by June, over $200,000 was spent to demolish the most dangerous part of the stadium, the northwest side of the grandstands, the only section that wasn't built directly on the side of the hill. This section was supported by concrete, and it was deemed to be a threat to public safety. It was completely removed by the end of 2018, leaving a section of grandstands missing and a grassy hill in its place. As it turns out, demolishing the rest of the stadium would prove to be a bit of a problem. Not only would it be very expensive, but over the years, the concrete grandstands and the foundation supporting it on the hill also was acting as a sort of retaining wall for the road behind it, George Washington Boulevard. So without the funds to fix this problem, the stadium would once again be left to the elements, completely abandoned. In its battered, vandalized state, the Rubber Bowl was a sad sight for many. By now, it was a very well-known abandoned location, one for explorers to visit and locals to hang out in. But its time was finally coming to an end. In early 2023, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine announced state funding for the demolition of blighted properties across the state. The Rubber Bowl was on that list. So finally, after 15 years of more or less sitting abandoned, demolition finally resumed on the stadium. By summer of 2023, the entire facility had been erased from the hillside. Reinforcements were installed to keep the road above in place, and that was it for the Rubber Bowl. gone after 84 years of life. Documented by the Akron Beacon-Journal back in 1940, during the dedication ceremony, Akron's mayor at the time proclaimed that, quote, "If there were any lingering doubt in the minds of any citizens or the rest of the United States as to which way Akron is headed, they have been swept away tonight." That confidence, solely based around this stadium, was electric and very optimistic. I suppose this beloved public landmark was successful for decades after it was open. But there's also no denying that Akron itself has gone through some hard times. Venues like this exist to fill a need of their time, and when that time expires and replacements are built, there's always a question on what to do with these treasured structures. We saw a similar situation with the Miami Marine Stadium, another local venue that fell into disrepair once it was deemed to be irrelevant. The Rubber Bowl was just another one of those stadiums which outlived its perceived value, and that was despite many wanting it to stay. Once the headlining primary tenant left, the Akron Zips, there were few parties willing to utilize the space. All other events moved to bigger and more modern venues, and the company that took it over was ultimately irresponsible and let the structure fall into an irreversible state of disrepair, even after many false promises. Today, there really isn't much left. Really, it looks about the same as it did in the late 1930s when the hill was first dug out. Just a large indent in the hill where the stadium once was. The adjacent Soapbox Derby drag strip is still there, another public entertainment venue which has been around for just as long. The airport across the way is also now called the Akron Fulton Airport, named of course after the man who ran it and had the dream for the bowl. And his dream became a successful reality, one that many revere today, whether they played on the field, watched an exciting game, or spent time at the many concerts and festivals, watching legends take to the stage with 40,000 other cheering fans. That's the lasting legacy of this iconic venue for many. It's one that will always be remembered for the charm and character, more so than the meticulously planned stadiums of today. But it's a legacy that will always live on in Akron's and Ohio's history. And even today, its unmistakable shape in the earth will exist there for years to come. Private data concerns are prevalent everywhere, even at live events with modern sports venues. But you're most at risk online, just browsing as normal. Your data is always being collected in the background, and from there, it's sold to data brokers. Oftentimes, it leads to spam phone calls and a seemingly never-ending onslaught of spam emails. But thanks to this video's sponsor, Incogni, it's something I don't really have to deal with anymore. Incogni simplifies the process of submitting requests to have your personal data removed, something that can be very tedious. All you need to do is sign up, grant them access to remove data on behalf of you, and simply just watch the process. Since I signed up with them a few months ago, they've suppressed over 40 data broker sites, saving me over 30 hours of time if I were to do it all myself. Overall, I now have some more peace of mind that Incogni is taking care of submitting requests to malicious data brokers who are banking on you not doing anything about it. So it's a great service that makes personal data management incredibly simple. Plus, it's very affordable, so you really can't go wrong. That's especially true when you use my special link, incogni.com/brightsun, which you can also find in the description below, and use my code BRIGHTSUN. That will get you an exclusive 60% off an annual plan. Anyway guys, my name is Jake, and thank you very much for watching.